Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TCLF One-on-One Series. Through the One-on-One Series, we aim to interact with the best legal professionals from India and around the world. Today, we'll be talking about a very interesting field of law, that is public health law, and we are truly honored to host Ms. Kritika Khanijo on the platform. Ma'am currently works as a legal consultant at the World Health Organization in Geneva. She has also had the opportunity to work with other international organizations such as the UNCTAD in the form or in the role of a legal consultant. And ma'am holds a master's degree in international economic law, investment law, and public international law from the GIDS Geneva. Ma'am, it's truly an honor to host you here. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thanks, Shashwat. Thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be on the 101 series.
Likewise, ma'am, it's an honor to host you. Just to set the tone for the conversation, ma'am, let's talk about your journey as a lawyer. What inspired you to pursue law as a career? Let's start with that.
Gosh, that really takes me down memory lane because it was, I think, class 10 when people try to figure out what is the subject they want to take and what road do they want to go down to. And I, at that point, had consumed a fair share of Boston Legal and their most famous character, Denny Crane, Ally McBeal, and was reading a lot of John Grisham. But apart from that, I used to debate in high school and was attracted to the cerebral nature of the profession. So I went up to my parents and said, I want to study law. And my dad, I remember, had said, are you mad? Do you want to be one of those advocates sitting under an umbrella in Patiala court? Because there was no other lawyer in my family. And I said, no, the field has changed so much now and it's not like that. So like a true budding lawyer, I took out research and, I showed him all these national law schools that were coming up and the sort of opportunities that were there. And to which they said, okay, this looks like a good idea. And then 2009 was the second CLAT that had taken place, which coincidentally was also the year in which the papers got leaked in RML NLU itself. Right. So everyone's preparation sort of went out of the window, but coincidentally, I ended up in Lucknow, and which was a very new university at that time. Our first batch also hadn't graduated. But just, going through the rhythm of 5 years of law school, and then I ended up doing a clerkship. I worked briefly at a law firm in Jangpura, and then did a clerkship with Justice Ranjan Gogoi at the Supreme Court. And through my final years, I was clear that I wanted to study further. But, the options are so many and the specializations are so many that I hadn't sort of narrowed it down. But after my clerkship, I was clear that I wanted to specialize in economic law. And my journey sort of then got me to the Graduate Institute in Geneva. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride so far.
That's a very nice way to describe your journey, right from high school to your university, and then your plans to study further. So, talking about your current role, can you tell us more about your role at the WHO? What do you do primarily? What are your day-to-day tasks there?
Sure. So I work in a technical team called the Public Health Law and Policies in the Health Promotion Department. Now, what our team does is that we assist member states with the legal issues, but with a focus on modifiable risk factors for non-communicable diseases. To simplify it, such as tobacco control issues, alcohol control issues. What is it that what legal or regulatory measures can you implement for promoting healthier diets in countries? But my bread and butter, so to say, is tobacco product regulation. which has two streams that I focus on. One is, these emerging nicotine and tobacco products that are there in the market. You must have heard about all the e-cigarette issues that had
Right.
cropped up in India. And the second is plain packaging of tobacco products. So in March 21, we published a publication on where, for over 2 years, I, along with my co-author, we analyzed 90 odd judgments across jurisdictions on these emerging products. So what happens is then from this research that we have, we are in a position to advise member states when called upon on what is it that they should do with their tobacco legislation. How is it that they should regulate these products? For example, is their definition clause broad enough that it even encompasses these products? And what happens sometimes is that, these products have entered the market, but there wasn't any regulation or any legislation for these products. So a part of the job is to help them with revising their tobacco laws. And then for some countries who want to implement plain packaging, and we have around 18 odd countries which have done that, to what is it that they have to put in their enabling legislation or their regulations in order to appropriately go ahead with that policy measure.
Right, ma'am. That's a very interesting field actually to work on all these cutting edge issues, because as far as public health goes, because the issues regarding e-cigarettes and all of that, it's quite emerging. And even in India, there are a lot of discussions happening each day about these legislations. I remember maybe 1 year back or a couple of years back, there was a government regulation regarding e-cigarettes, and there was a lot of debate and discussion around it. So these are indeed very cutting edge issues to work on.
So that's very true. India did see some issues on that, and we also saw some litigation coming out of India with challenges against the notifications that they'd used to prohibit, these products. And then subsequently, they took out this legislation where they included a very broad definition of what are e-cigarettes or ends, so to say, and they included everything there. So yeah, it is a new challenge that we are seeing globally, especially with the tobacco industry trying to promote these products as lesser harmful alternatives. We have quite a challenge on our hands with respect to these products.
That's quite true, ma'am. And moving forward, you've described you have a very diverse experience. You studied at RML and LU, and then you went on to study at the Graduate Institute in Geneva. So how has your experience at these institutions helped you in your career? What are the learnings that you have obtained from these institutions?
So, like I said, at RML, it was still a new institution at that point, but I made use of every opportunity that came my way. I was a mooter, and I took part in JESSUP, I took part in Stetson. And, coincidentally, that one of the moots that I took part in at that time, the plain packaging disputes had just cropped up, was part of a moot problem that I'd done. So that's when I had read up on the issue and, educated myself about investment law issues such as expropriation, fair and equitable treatment. And that's a sort of, seed remained in my head. And in fact, even when I wanted to make my decision about my master's, it was, the research that I'd done in my fourth year and, knowing these professors at the Graduate Institute, which led me to come to Geneva. So, it's sometimes you don't know the path, but it just sort of unfolds in a certain way. And graduate institute, again, is in the heart of Geneva, and it gives you, so many networking opportunities. It allows you to meet with practitioners of interests, and so many people who are working at international organizations come and take your classes. So I have tried to utilize everything that was available at that point from both these institutions. And then I just want to pause there, and because I get a lot of questions from students who get the opportunity to do clerk, and there's a diverse opinion again on that. Some would prefer going the litigation route, and some would are confused whether the clerkship is worth their time and money or not. To which I highly recommend the clerkship. Just the sort of clarity of thought that you get by interacting with someone at that level, and the cases which you would never get as a year one associate in any firm is what you're studying, researching, and briefing a judge about. So, all the cumulative of that was very, very helpful for the foundation of my career, so to say.
Right, absolutely, ma'am. I think I concur with that. I've heard numerous opinions about the Supreme Court clerkship, and mostly it has been positive, like the kind of cases, and obviously just the thought process of a judge, understanding
Absolutely.
someone who is of that stature, who has had a standing at the bar as well, and now is a part of the bench, how they process things, and that's very important. Now, when you've also had the opportunity to work with the UNCTAD, now you're working with the WHO. And what I understand from this conversation is that your work is not primarily confined to only legal propositions or legal problems. Basically, as a legal consultant, you have to focus upon these legal issues with another lens as well. Perhaps sometimes an economic lens, sometimes with the lens of public health. So, what are the challenges, if I, so to speak, what are the challenges that you have faced in adopting a multidisciplinary approach to legal issues rather than a purely legal approach?
That's a very, very interesting question, because one of my first jobs, like you said, was as a legal consultant with UNCTAD. This is right after my master's. So, you study that much theory, and, you know how to do legal research, but I was in a team of economists, and where it was a team on in the trade and investment division on investment policy reviews is the team. So what they basically do is see the data of what is the inflow and outflow of foreign direct investment in a certain country, and then the lawyer's job is to figure out what is the legal and regulatory framework of that country. And what, so to say, are the obstacles or hurdles. Now, to equate that law with that data was definitely in the beginning a challenging process, because again, through our law school, we're not wired like that. So it would be an interesting exchange between the lawyers and the economists in the team of, this is the law, but they would say, look at the data. What is that impact of the taxation regime, so to say? Or what is the impact of, the investment treaties they have ratified, and has that translated to more foreign direct investment for them or not? At the same time, like I said, in my current role in tobacco, it is so important to understand the science of it. For example, coming back to my discussion on emerging products, if the industry argues that, what these products emit is not smoke, but vapor, they can classify it whatever they want. But what is the constituents of what is smoke? What is that combustion process? And what is the combustion process here? And then how do you, so to say, reflect that in the law? So it's always interesting to, I'm surrounded by doctors and scientists in my current role, to understand that, those nitty-gritties, and then translate that into the work that you're doing. But you're always learning, which is the most interesting part, I think, of doing something which is so multidisciplinary.
That's fascinating to say the least, ma'am. And talking about one of these themes, that is the role of the interaction between investment and public health law. Can you,
Mm-hmm.
and you've written about this, you've given numerous lectures, you've spoken about this at multiple forums. Can you tell us how do the two fields interact? Because I'm very much curious knowing about this, and how do the two fields interact, investment and public health law?
Sure. Now going back to plain packaging, and like I said about that, the mood and the sort of work that I do. But in around 2010, a tobacco multinational had initiated an investment arbitration against one of the countries which was implementing these new packaging and labeling laws. Now, despite the fact that that country was implementing, something which was mandated under the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, they were dragged for a fairly long investment arbitration, saying that those measures impacted the intellectual property rights of this tobacco company. Now, there was Australia was one of the first movers in plain packaging, and they also witnessed an investment arbitration. In Canada, we have seen when a patent has been revoked, a foreign investor has come and challenged. So the interaction is such that it intersects with a country's right to regulate vis-a-vis
Right.
what are the commercial interests of a multinational company. For example, even during COVID, we've seen so many measures, so many public health measures that countries have had to take. But then the question is, how does it impact a certain investor's interests? So that's where it interacts and sort of makes the matter slightly complicated.
Right. So, just to point this out, so the field of public health law, as I mentioned earlier, it has to take within itself a lot of other studies, investments and commercial realities, trade, and all of it. Intellectual property, that's another very interesting area of law, and which is very much connected to public health. So I think it's all a culmination of all these things that you need to become a good public health lawyer. And coming to the last segment of this conversation, you've also had the opportunity to work with the Influenza Framework, which aims to basically boost the preparedness with respect to pandemic influenzas. And not many people know about this, but it's a revolutionary framework, and I've read about this in order to prepare for this conversation. So can you tell us more about the project? What was the vision, and what was your role, and how was your experience in the same?
Sure. In fact, like you said, this was one of my first stints at WHO, and this was very interesting because when I read up on the role, and I'm like, wow, what sort of things do international organizations do? But like you rightly said, and we've heard so many news reports about the coronavirus mutations. So similarly, the influenza virus also mutates. And the influenza virus sharing is coordinated by an international network of influenza laboratories that conduct year-round surveillance of influenza, assessing the risk of pandemic influenza, and assisting in preparedness measures. Now, what this network does is that it serves as a global alert mechanism of sorts. And the objective of the framework is to improve sharing of these biological materials. So in this team, there was a group of lawyers which negotiated the material transfer agreements of these PIP biological materials. And what happened was that under that contract, you establish the rights and obligations with respect to many matters, including how these biological materials will be handled, what is the intellectual property rights associated with those biological materials, and of course, dispute resolution. So in fact, what is, and this is public information, so what is now being debated is whether we need a similar pandemic response treaty, which is going to be bigger, and that is going to be debated in November of this year, to see what is, what obligations of member states can be negotiated in a broader range, not just from the influenza perspective, but in light of the COVID-19 pandemic from a broader lens.
Right. That's again very fascinating, ma'am. And to actually work in this field and to hear about this is something different. To read about this is something different, and to actually be on the ground and work towards these things, I'm pretty sure that it must be a fantastic experience. Just to put a closure to this conversation, ma'am, what would your advice be to people who want to work with international organizations or people who look forward to working in the field of public health law but do not know where to find the opportunities? So what would your advice be?
Well, that's a tough one because I don't like to be too preachy. I think, you guys are so smart and got so much more exposure right now in law school than what we had because of LinkedIn and all of you trying to, see what is the best in the market. But if I could give myself one advice when I was in law school, it would be to, sort of believe in the fact that it all works out in the end, and also to understand that your career journey is going to be truly unique. You can't emulate anyone else's path. So it is to believe and work in that interest area. And again, it's okay to be confused. Like I, in fourth year wanted to specialize in competition law because, that was just an emerging area at that time. And all my internships at one point were just focused on competition law, to now where I am, which again, I need understanding of antitrust and competition law,
Right.
but you don't sometimes know where the path can lead you, So it's I love that Steve Jobs quote from that Stanford commencement that he gave, that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. But
Right.
it is to trust that those dots will somehow connect in the future. So
Right.
yeah, that would be my advice, that trust that the dots will connect in the future and just follow what your heart desires.
Absolutely agree to that, ma'am. And with that, we'll put an end to this conversation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining in. And once again,
It's
it
a
was an
pleasure.
honor to host you. Thank you for sharing your experiences.
Thank you, Shashwat, for having me once again.